Good morning. Welcome to another episode of College Coffee Talk, coming to you live every Monday morning on our Facebook page, and then in distant replay on our podcasts, the College Admissions Edge, and our YouTube channel, and probably some other places we don't know about. Andy Lockwood, joined by wife and upper management business partner Pearl Lockwood. Good morning, Pearl.
Good morning, Andy. Good morning, listeners
And perhaps viewers. And if you are enjoying a morning beverage, I am, courtesy of Seabreeze Deli and Victor. Pearl with her branded coffee cup. Join us in a synchronized sip. 1, 2, 3. Delightful. So today we have something pretty interesting to talk about. But for those of you who are new to our little show here, this is a show where we talk about all things about getting into college, about paying for college, about test prep, which is, I guess, related to getting into college, and other various sorted and sundry types of related topics. So today we're picking up on a conversation we had a couple of weeks ago about the early decision lie. And instead, there's a little bit of a contradictory story that came out the other day about Tulane University acting like a spurned, jealous ex-girlfriend by enacting retribution. You know, there's a lot of talk in the news about our president enacting retribution, but Tulane seems to have done the same thing by apparently informing the guidance department of a private school in Colorado that because one of their students was admitted early decision last year for 2025, but decided not to go to that school, Tulane was responding by penalizing this college and saying, we're not going to take anyone who applies to Tulane for this admission cycle. So there, you guys broke the rule, so to speak, which is actually not the case. So, Pearl, why don't you give us your comments on that first, and then I'll just chime in when necessary. Okay. I know you did some deep research on this, and we talk a lot about early decision, whether it's fake binding, even though you won't hear this from guidance counselors, but it really is. Take it away.
And of course, is there true retribution against a high school? Is that real?
Take it away, Pearl.
So I found this curious because Andy and I have always been, in our 20 plus years of experience, under the belief that a high school gets punished necessarily for a decision of a student. And
not under that belief.
Not under that belief, that in fact was a myth, a college myth, so to speak. Yes. So when this article...
So sorry to interrupt. So in other words, we hear things from various high schools like, we had a kid 6 years ago who got into Stanford, then said they weren't going, and therefore no one has gotten into Stanford in the last 6 years because they're punishing us, as opposed to the more logical explanation, which is that Stanford admits 3% of its students, and it's super hard to get into no matter what. So we hear these things all the time, mostly coming from guidance counselors, by the way, who are terrified that if you actually use your contractual, and that's in quotes, provision or contractual out to get out of early decision, then somehow it's going to taint the next year's class. But in this case, it appears to have done that, but continue. Sorry to interrupt.
Right. So my first question, of course, knowing that the only, ethical, proper way to get out of your so-called binding early decision commitment is, the way we understand is, and it says it in black and white on that early decision commitment, right before you hit the kill switch, the commit button, that you will in fact attend there. The only out you have is a financial out. So what does that mean?
right there in that agreement.
It is written that that is the only thing that is acceptable, in which case you could go back to the school that you've committed early decision to and withdraw that commitment ethically and morally and above board, is if, and this is the key, you have applied to financial aid applications in the way the school requires, and any other school you've applied to, if you apply for financial aid and you decide once the school, the early decision school, has offered you a package that it doesn't work for your family, period, plain and simple, in your subjective opinion, the family's subjective opinion, if that financial aid package does not work for them, they can withdraw from that early decision commitment and go elsewhere.
Right.
Okay?
So just to paraphrase the actual agreement, which is signed by the guidance counselor, the parents, and the child, even though kids are minors and they can't enter into contracts. But anyway, just putting that aside, the agreement says something like, if we admit you early decision, you have to come unless the financial aid offer doesn't make it possible for you to attend, or is not adequate, or I'm paraphrasing here, but just to pick up on what you just said, there's no objective standards, entirely subjective. There's no judge and jury or means test or something that you have to prove. You just have to not have an adequate financial aid offer. So what we, in our recovering attorney mode and wearing those hats, have taken that to mean is that, okay, if you're trying to make an argument that you want to get out of early decision because the financial aid offer is not adequate, then you should at least go through the motions of applying for financial aid. Therefore, you have something in writing to fall back on. And we've had a handful of clients do this over the years, and most recently last year. And there was no big deal at all when they notified admissions. Granted, the two schools that I can think of off the top of my head were probably a lot harder to get into, much more elite schools in Tulane. And Tulane is notorious for protecting its yield, which is, for those of you who are not as dorky about this stuff as we are, the yield is the ratio of admitted students to matriculated students. So Tulane does all sorts of sort of hardball tactics to pressure kids to apply early decision 2 in December when they get rejected from their other ED1 schools. And schools out, by the way, they can't talk to their guidance counselors, but Tulane will sort of flood the box with all kinds of emails saying, hey, we saw you apply to early action, but if you apply to ED2, you have a really good chance of getting in, and we'll even give you some money. And so they're notorious for playing hardball. And this is another situation where I think that they're living up to their reputation by saying, hey, okay, whatever the situation, we don't know the situation, right? About the kid who rescinded on early decision.
In the New York Times article, who came from this school out in Colorado?
Yeah, like tell us what we know first, and then we can engage in wild speculation.
Fine. So in my brief research on the matter, I learned the following about the school: that in fact,
the high school
that, this vendetta from Tulane, et cetera, and so forth is being exacted on. And what I learned, because there was a perception when you read this article, I guess, well, I don't even need to, but I know initially where my head went. Oh my goodness, a whole high school and all that.
Well, so the article was fairly balanced, because it did point out that there is a right to withdraw early decision, which I think, if I were to hazard a guess, more than 95% of people reading that who have kids applying to college or who recently applied probably read that and thought, really? I didn't think you could get out of early decision. But the article did point that out. Mm-hmm. But as you said, it seems to have, this Tulane seems to have enacted a vendetta, like you said, like somehow this high school broke some law against humanity by allowing this kid to, and it wasn't even, there's no way they can control what a kid does either, by the way, but somehow the high school's getting punished because this kid exercised his right. So what do we know about the high school?
Number one, the first question about that situation is, we don't know whether this particular student did in fact file financial aid forms to preserve his ethical moral right to get out of a so-called binding early decision commitment. We don't know that.
Yeah.
That
So
matters.
wild
That matters.
speculation. Sorry, wild speculation is that
Probably
school,
not.
probably not, because the school
Because
costs
of
$40-something thousand a year in tuition,
$5,000 a year, correct?
and
And then
most
here was the
people.
other kicker.
Well, most sorry to interrupt, but most
Sure.
people who send their kids to private schools automatically think they shouldn't apply for financial aid, so
And
that's
don't.
yeah, so they won't.
Right. The second thing I learned about this school is the graduating class has, drumroll, a total of 16 students in the class. Okay,
That's huge.
talk amongst yourselves. What?
So Tulane is turning off this massive spigot of applicants.
Of 16, and of the 16, who knows what percentage of those 16 applied to Tulane altogether?
Yeah.
And perhaps those, I don't know, 3 kids, 4 kids, well, we don't know anything else, do we? But you know, numbers, facts matter, right?
Sure.
Oh, I'll continue with this. So then, of course, after reading the article, am I launching into that part of the story as well?
I don't know what part you're talking about, but
Well,
apparently you are.
So we had a student this past year.
Oh. That story.
Yeah, we had a student this past year who contacted me, who's who contacted us mid-year last year. He's a personal friend. And the student goes to a hoity-toity, expensive Manhattan private school, high school, and had made an athletic commitment to a very competitive, small liberal arts school in the Northeast. Very as difficult to get into as any Ivy League. Leave it there. And he was committing to play a sport, and therefore had to apply early decision, as most committed student athletes need to do. And that was that. As the year unfolded, the student decided that the student didn't want to play sport anymore at the college level, had misgivings about maybe the school that he was now committed to, and
tiny school.
What?
It's a tiny school. He didn't want to be in that small environment.
He envisioned a different environment for himself in college. So I spoke to this family, and I said, look, the only way you can do that is if you preserve that right by filing financial aid forms. And she was, we make too much money. That's ridiculous. And they'll laugh at us at our very expensive Manhattan private school and blah, blah, blah. And I said, listen, this is how you do it. You do it because it's the only way you can preserve this right to get out of this early decision commitment. If your kid wants to be at other places, potentially, this is the only way where you can hold your head high and go back to your guidance counselor and your hoity-toity school. And when they're going to sneer down their nose, because it is at this precipice where we learn that we parents, students, us as advisors behind these students, and the school have distinct agendas in this moment, because the guidance counselor, who in theory is for the student and the betterment of the student, needs to, or feels the dedication and loyalty, fiduciary, if you will, to its high school and its future candidates who are going through the college process. And now you have scorned, was the position anyway on this person, this family, even though at this point they had filed financial aid forms with my advice, and they had to tell the guidance counselor, look, he's not going to go where we said he's going to go. He's going to go somewhere else. Lo and behold, that someplace else happened to be a better financial aid package than the early decision school. And so,
and that's not even relevant. So because
it isn't.
What we're talking about here,
again, right?
Yeah, sorry. What we're talking about here is that the guidance counselor thought that they had committed, violated one of the 10 commandments, and wanted the kid to live up to his commitment and go to a college that he didn't want to go to. So, in other words, force him to go, and wouldn't even look at your friends in the face anymore. She was so livid and upset because she was afraid that next year's kids applying to that extremely competitive, highly sought after liberal arts school wouldn't be able to get in because of some sort of blackballing like Tulane engaged in. But in contrast, when they finally screwed up the courage to call up this college and say, we want to be let out of our early decision commitment, what happened?
There was no consequence, no issue. They simply said, sure.
Yeah,
and
no problem.
released them from that commitment. He attends a different school, and
right. So part of the reason that this story was in was it the New York Times? I can't remember. Okay.
The Journal.
The New York Times about Tulane was because their behavior was so exceptional, and schools don't do this. So in this case, they did. I'm going to predict that because of backlash that they're going to get, not just from readers but from other colleges, they're going to back off of that ban. It's like we're going to impose a 200% tariff. No, we're not. Type of thing. And I think Tulane is going to rethink its position on letting one or two of the applicants from next year's batch of 16 or whatever clients, I guess that's this year, actually apply to Tulane. Which, by the way, I mean, Tulane's a great school, but it's not it's not Harvard. It's not. There's plenty of other schools that are on par with Tulane. So I don't really know what the loss is from the student side either. I mean, from the Tulane side, how much can they really care about losing a crop of up to 16 kids applying there? But
assuming 100% of that class is applying to that one school.
right, yeah, up to 16, yeah. If I were the
that's assuming 100% of that graduating class.
Yeah. Comment from Rob. Good morning. Yeah, if you remember, the school counselor isn't 100% aligned with your interests. They do work for the high school, and I would say there is a lot of overlap in general, because every time I say something anti-guidance counselor, I get some sort of offended response from a guidance counselor. Yeah. But some counselors, I'm not saying every counselor, some counselors don't have this perspective that we're talking about, which is we need to do something that's in the best interest of the kid. And just because in the situation we're talking about, a 17-year-old who is gung-ho, wanted to continue playing football or whatever sport there was, we don't have to
badminton.
Yeah, probably badminton. That's more credible. In the throes of a heated badminton season, decided to apply to continue his career, and then later after the season had second thoughts. I don't know if you need to punish him by forcing him to voluntarily give up something that's a right, so to speak, that's written right in that agreement, just to help the high school.
It's also secreted by some. Either they, again, this is really what we frequently say about guidance counselors. We don't mean to sound like we're bashing them, except they are trained for ABC. And all of this college admission and financial aid and early decision and all these nuances that we talk about every week, they're not trained for that. That's the simple truth. We're not criticizing, a nurse isn't trained to do what a doctor does. A doctor isn't trained to do what a policeman does. I mean, it's that simple.
Yeah, that's simple. And like Rob pointed out, and like we say all the time, what the guidance counselor's audience and their agenda is not it overlaps, but it's not 100% the same as the kids. But even when they tell you, oh, you have to live up to your early decision commitment, you can't possibly get out of it, they're wrong. And then we've been saying that for years, and then the story comes out about Tulane, and I'm like, that's interesting.
Right.
But I
Let's
think
see if there's a follow-up to that story.
Yeah, no, they're way out of line. I'm really sure they're going to have to come off of that stance. That's my prediction here now today, October 27th, 2025. Okay. Well, Pearl, you have anything else you want to chat about? I've got a couple things on my list as we.
Oh, take it away, Andy.
Nice voice. Okay.
Well, got accolades for the voice thing last week, but
yeah, you're bringing it. So because it's October 27th, I'm reviewing a lot of last-minute essay changes and essays in general as we get closer and closer to November 1st, which is early decision and early action deadlines for many schools. And I had a conversation last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, with a client who showed me an essay. She'd been working with one of our editors. She attends another elite, or as you might say, hoity-toity, private high school in New York City. And her guidance counselor had signed off on this essay, and I read it, and I said, you know what, to our editor, her name is Kaya, I said, I think this is kind of boring. I mean, she's not a boring kid. She's got a very interesting extracurriculars, and she's smart and she's a go-getter. But this essay was along the lines of, I was told we were moving. I was nervous about it. Then we moved. I made a friend, and we joined a club, and now I'm good. And I said, she's lacking any type of personal insight about, number one, the nervousness, the anxiety. Number two, what else she did after she got over this, which was interesting in and of itself, over this anxiety, nervousness, and how she went on with her life to and what activities she did, etc., after she overcame this obstacle. And the response that I got from our editor, and then ultimately from the client, was the editor said, I think she's just burnt out. She doesn't want to write this anymore. And when I spoke to the kid, and her parents were right there, and I said, look, this essay, I don't want you to take this the wrong way. This essay is boring. You are not, but this essay is.
Why would you take that the wrong way?
And well, I'm distinguishing between the two.
Continue.
I'm trying. I mean, they're hiring. And by the way, beforehand, I will admit this. I sort of gamed the refs. I said privately to the parents, I'm like, look, I'm anticipating that she doesn't want to hear this, but I need to tell her this because you guys hired me to give you, this advice. Yeah. They said, oh, no, definitely do that, no matter what. So in retrospect, maybe I could have chosen my words a little bit better, but the point was that the essay wasn't reflecting her, what she really had to offer, which is what the essays are all about. Like, what value are you going to bring to that college community? And one of the things she said was, well, I don't understand. My guidance counselor said it was great. And I said, as diplomatically as I could, which is certainly not a word I usually hear, which is that, a lot of times when we work with kids, we find that the essays need a handful of additional revisions after the guidance counselor said it's fine. Because like you just said, Pearl, that they have different training. They're not necessarily looking at the college application and the essays as marketing, as helping kids distinguish themselves from 20,000, or in this case, she's applying to a college that will get more than 100,000 applications this year. Historically, they've been getting over 100,000 each year. And I said, you really need this essay to stand out more and just not be just a bland, I did this, I did that, and goodbye and good luck. I'm looking forward to college. So there was probably a 3 to 4 day period where the parents and I were back channeling about this. And then eventually, like the puff of smoke went up to elect the Pope, and the mom excitedly said, she's going to revise the essay. And I'm like, great, right? Yeah. And I didn't have to point this out to her, but what I could have said was, look, I'd be very fine too if the essay were done. It's less work for us. I don't have to pay my editor more to keep editing this. I can move on to other things in my life. And I think a lot of guidance counselors sort of think similarly to that. Like, okay, it's done. I'm just moving on. I'm too busy. But everything that goes out the door from Lockwood College Prep, as far as I'm concerned, I want to make sure I eyeball it and it looks great, as good as it can, while still sounding like a kid wrote it, of course. But I wanted to help the child advocate the best way that they can to optimize what they are putting out there to the admissions committees. So it needed more work, but it was a battle, and a lot of it had to do with the feedback from the school guidance counselor at this very exclusive, high-end private high school in Manhattan. Another example. Pearl, anything else?
Well, we are, to circle back to where the sincerity, although it doesn't, again,
Spit it
this
out.
year, this upcoming year, especially with an early decision commitment, and at the schools we've just been discussing are upwards of, 80, 90, $100,000 a year. If it turns out that this applicant has a family, let's say, that doesn't qualify for need-based aid or much need-based aid, and I just discussed the cost of the school, and in the financial aid formula, they qualify for very little to not much financial aid, but does that mean that family has enough saved? What with the new borrowing rules under the big, beautiful bill that go into effect this year, which are, and it's really important because a lot of people are going to feel the squeeze here. Parents can no longer borrow everything they need to up to that cost of attendance to send their kid to whatever school they get into. So this is no longer a theoretical feeling the package doesn't work. Now, families, parents can only borrow a total of $65,000 per student for all the undergraduate years combined. Oh, yeah, I know that that's $20,000. It isn't $20,000 a year. It's $20,000 up to $20,000 year 1, year 2, and year 3. But year 4, you're only capped at you can only borrow up to $5,000 if you've maxed out those other years. It's a total of $65,000 per student. So now, and it's $20,000 a year. So if in that first year you've borrowed $20,000 as the parent, your student in their first year, and this is across the board as a freshman, can borrow $5,500, and I'm talking about the federal direct loan system from the government. That's a total of $25,000 off of let's just call it a $95,000 school, like most of the Ivies. The shortfall, as you can hear, 95 minus 25, is significant, right? It's over $65,000, right?
Mm-hmm.
If those families don't have a spare $65,000 to pay that school and don't have another means of getting it, they don't have it saved, that family may need to go to a school that they can afford. Like, let's say in that scenario, like a Binghamton, which costs $35,000 all in, which is more of what the government probably had in mind here to cover. So it's going to be a reality this year where people may not be able to stay with those committed early decision commitments if that package may not be tenable for a lot of families this year.
True. All right. So I think the takeaway here before we wrap up is you need to, number one, be the CEO of yourself. Don't abdicate responsibility to your guidance counselor or give away your power to any college. Yeah. Number 2, I think this is going to be a really big year for negotiating packages. Mm-hmm. If anyone watching this has any questions or needs help with the financial aid applications, Pearl is the person to speak to. She does 400 families worth of financial aid applications every year, and she's always looking for more work, she tells me. So if you want information on that service, just notify us. The best place is probably leaving a comment right here. Don't reach out to us privately. We don't check those messages. Or you can just go to our website, lockwoodcollegeprep.com, and you can text us from the site. Okay. Pearl, that was fulsome and exciting as always.
Yes. Likewise.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, guys. We're getting back to work. You guys get back to your day. Thanks for joining us, whether you're live or listening to the podcast or the YouTube channel. We enjoy doing this. If you have any suggestions about upcoming topics you want us to cover, you can drop those in the comments too, or reach out to us on the website as well. Have a great week.